You know, trust is a funny thing. You spend your whole life teaching your son what's right, and then you watch him hand his future to a stranger with a smile that doesn't reach your eyes. That's how it started. One quiet December night in Seattle, the house smelling of pine and cinnamon, a fire humming in the old brick hearth. My boy, Blake, 36, sharp as they come, sat across from me with that grin, the kind I hadn't seen since he was 10. He told me he'd met someone, a woman from Germany. Smart, beautiful, cultured. She's the one, Dad. That's what he said. And I wanted to believe him. God, I really did. After Rachel died, I promised myself I'd never be the man who killed joy with doubt. But something about that girl's name, Johanna, sounded rehearsed even before I met her. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Maybe it was the way Blake said it, like a man hypnotized. Or maybe it was the silence that followed. You learn to hear things differently when you spent 40 years digging secrets out of dirt. When she finally walked into my home a week later, tall, elegant, with eyes like polished ice, I felt it, that quiet instinct. The same one that kept me alive in the deserts of Egypt when the ground gave way under liars' maps. She smiled at me like I was part of some museum exhibit. Something to study, not someone to respect. Still, I smiled back, played the polite old man, poured her wine, laughed when she said, "You must be proud of your son." But deep down, I knew I was looking at trouble wrapped in silk. And when I later heard what she really thought of me, well, let's just say that was a night something in me shifted. That was a night I made a promise, not out loud, but deep inside my chest. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," I whispered to the dark. "You have no idea what kind of man you've just lied to." I remember the first time I saw Johanna in daylight. She arrived 3 days before Christmas, stepping out of a black SUV like she was walking onto a movie set. Snowflakes clung to her coat, white on emerald green, and her parents followed right behind, smiling with that polished European charm. They looked perfect, too perfect, the kind of perfect you only see when someone's rehearsed it. Blake rushed to greet them, his face lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. I stood back on the porch, pretending to adjust the wreath on the door. It gave me a moment to watch, really watch. Her father's handshake lingered when Blake mentioned his company. Her mother's gaze swept over the house like an appraiser at an auction. And Johanna? She didn't look at Blake. Not at first. She looked at the doorframe, the antiques, the family photos on the wall, as if she was cataloging assets. I've spent a lifetime reading traces, ancient carvings, buried fragments of truth. People aren't much different. They leave marks. They leave patterns. When we sat down for coffee, she was warm and charming. She complimented the bookshelves, asked about my expeditions, laughed in all the right places. Blake was enchanted. Hell, even I almost believed her. Almost. But then she slipped. Her eyes flicked toward the study when I mentioned my collection of artifacts. Just for a second, but enough. Not wonder. Calculation. Later that night, I caught a reflection in the window, staring at a photograph of Rachel and me. There was no softness there, no curiosity, just assessment. Like she was already figuring out where she'd fit once I was gone. And as the snow thickened outside and the Christmas lights hummed softly in the cold, I felt that instinct again, quiet, steady, undeniable. Something wasn't right, but I smiled anyway, because when you've spent your life unearthing lies, sometimes you let them think they're still buried. Christmas Eve, the kind of night that smells like cinnamon with smoke and old memories. The fire crackled, the glasses clinked, and laughter filled every corner of the house. I remember thinking, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I've grown too suspicious, too damn analytical for my own good. So I poured another glass of Merlot and told myself to relax. Blake was radiant, beaming beside Johanna like the world finally made sense again. Her parents, Herman and Elizabeth, fit right in, asking polite questions about my research, nodding thoughtfully at every word. For a moment, it almost felt like family, until Blake stepped into the kitchen to grab another bottle of wine. That's when the air changed, the way it does before a storm. They switched to German fluent, fast, confident. They didn't know I spoke it. Rachel taught me, back when love still had a voice in this house. And as I listened, the words cut deeper than I could have imagined. Johanna laughed, a sharp, cruel sound, and called me the old fool. Said I was too blinded by nostalgia to see what's coming. Her father joked about the company's shares. Her mother about how easily Americans believe in fairy tales. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just let their words crawl under my skin until they burned. When Blake returned, they switched back to English, smiling as if nothing had happened. But I could still hear the echo of their laughter. I raised my glass, steady as stone, and said in perfect German, Frohe Weihnachten. Moj die Wahrheit ut finden, Beaver. Johanna froze, her smile twitching for half a second before she recovered. She thought I had just mimicked a phrase. She had no idea. And as the clock struck midnight, I made another silent promise, one that would turn this Christmas from celebration to excavation. Because some truths aren't found in the dirt. They're dug out of people. That night, I didn't sleep. The snow kept falling, whispering against the windows like a warning. I sat by the fire, staring at the flames and listening to the echo of Johanna's voice in my head. Old fool. Funny thing about words, they don't just sting, they stick. They burrow in and wait. By dawn, I'd already made my decision. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. You don't dig up a ruin by swinging a shovel. You brush away the layers until the truth exposes itself. I called an old friend, Ian Morris. We'd shared tents in the deserts of Jordan, hunted relics, dodged bureaucrats, and worse. Now, he was an international law consultant, the kind of man who knew where all the skeletons were buried, both literal and legal. When I told him about Johanna and her family, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then he said, All right, Kev, let's start digging. Over the next few days, while everyone believed I was busy writing my memoirs, Ian was working the phones in Europe. I played the part of the cheerful old professor, nodding through Johanna's stories, smiling at her parents' compliments, every gesture rehearsed, every word measured. By Christmas night, Ian called back. His voice was low, deliberate. You were right, he said. There's a pattern. Bankruptcies, lawsuits, 2 canceled engagements, 1 in Munich, 1 in Vienna, both with wealthy men. I felt my heart steady, not racing, not breaking, just aligning, like an ancient lock turning. I thanked him, hung up, and looked out the window. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful. Lights glowed in the snow. I almost smiled, because if Johanna thought she'd fooled me, she hadn't met the man who spent 40 years unearthing lies buried for millennia. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about protecting my son. It was about restoring balance. Truth had been buried in my own house, and I was going to dig it up bone by bone. From that night on, I wore a mask, the same kind I'd seen 1,000 times in the field. The mask of patience, of kindness, of trust. It's a funny thing. Pretending to be fooled, it gives the other person just enough rope to hang themselves. Johanna thought she was winning. Every morning, she'd bring coffee to my study, calling me Dad in that soft, deliberate tone that sounded rehearsed. She'd ask about my books, my travels, the artifacts in my glass cases. I told her stories, half true, half bait. Sometimes I'd accidentally mention the value of a relic, or how my will hadn't been updated since Rachel passed. Each time, her eyes would flicker, just for a second, before she hid behind that perfect smile. Blake, meanwhile, was floating on air, planning the wedding, making calls, showing me venues online. I'd nod, pretending to care about flower arrangements while memorizing every move Johanna made. In the evenings, I started collecting my own evidence. Copies of text messages, bank transactions, whispered conversations caught through the smart speaker she didn't realize synced to my laptop. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent decades unearthing the past, and now I was excavating the present. Ian kept feeding me data from Germany, each report darker than the last. Fraud, false identities, immigration violations. She and her parents were serial survivors of their own scams, rebuilding their lives on the ashes of other people's trust. But I didn't tell Blake. Not yet. You can't just rip the truth from someone's hands. You have to let them feel the weight of the lie first. So I played my role with perfection, the trusting old man who'd finally let his guard down. I even offered to host an engagement dinner at the museum. To celebrate new beginnings, I said. Johanna smiled like victory itself. And as she took my arm, thanking me for my generosity, I caught a reflection in the window. The same cold gleam I'd seen in ancient gold, beautiful, deceptive, and ready to crumble the moment you touch it. The museum had always been my cathedral. Quiet halls filled with echoes of the past, where every artifact told a story of deceit, discovery, or redemption. When I suggested hosting an engagement celebration there, everyone loved the idea, especially Johanna. She called it a brilliant, elegant touch. Of course she did. She thought it was a stage built for her performance. She just didn't realize who wrote the script. I spent the next week preparing. Not just decorations and guest lists. No, I was building a truth exhibit of my own. Ian sent me the final dossier. Bank records, court files, screenshots of private messages. Make sure you're ready, he warned. Once you do this, there's no turning back. I've spent my life turning back, I told him. This time, I'm walking through. Blake was radiant that evening. He thought the night was for him. And, in a way, it was the beginning of his freedom. The museum sparkled garlands along marble railings, a jazz trio near the grand staircase, champagne in every glass. Guests mingled between exhibits of ancient masks and pottery. The irony didn't escape me. When Johanna walked in, heads turned. Emerald dress, perfect smile, the illusion complete. She moved like a queen entering her coronation. I smiled, too calm, steady, patient. Halfway through the night, I took the stage. The microphone felt heavy in my hand, like an artifact pulled from the ground after years of silence. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I began. My voice carried across the marble floor. You know, archaeology teaches us something profound, that truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds its way to light. Johanna's smile flickered. Just once. I told a story about a mask, ancient, beautiful, but hollow, crafted to hide the monster beneath. Laughter softened into quiet. Her parents exchanged glances. And then the lights dimmed, and the screen behind me flickered to life. Documents, photos, messages, evidence. And in that instant, the Hall of History became a courtroom. At first, there was silence, the kind that feels too heavy to breathe through. Faces turned toward the screen, champagne glasses frozen midair. On it, line after line appeared. German court filings, headlines from Munich. Photos of Johanna with another fiancé, smiling the same rehearsed smile she wore tonight. Then came the messages. Her chat with friend, written in German, bragging about the rich American boy who'd save her family. The translations rolled right beneath each line. Blake's glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Johanna tried to speak. This is a mistake, a misunderstanding. But her voice trembled. Her father lunged forward, hissing in German for her to keep quiet. Elizabeth's face went pale as parchment. I kept my voice calm. When I was younger, I said, I thought the worst lies were the ones carved in stone. But it turns out the most dangerous ones are whispered over dinner tables. Then I stepped aside, letting the evidence play on. Bankruptcies, lawsuits, immigration fraud. The full anatomy of their deceit displayed under museum lighting, poetic justice. A reporter in the crowd snapped photos. A friend of Blake's muttered, "Oh my God." Someone laughed, that nervous, guilty kind of laugh people make when they realize they're witnessing ruin in real time. Johanna's mask finally cracked. Her voice rose, desperate. "Blake, please." He's twisting everything. But Blake didn't move. He just stared at her, the life draining from his face. I ended it simply. History doesn't lie. People do. Then I clicked the remote. The screen went black. The music stopped. And in the hollow quiet that followed, all anyone could hear was the soft hum of the exit lights and the sound of 3 lives collapsing under their own fraud. Johanna turned to me then, eyes blazing with hatred and disbelief. That was the first time she realized this wasn't an ambush. It was an excavation. The chaos that followed was almost beautiful in its precision, like an ancient ruin collapsing exactly where the architect once planned. The guests backed away, whispers rising like a wave. Johanna's father barked something in German, a sharp command, desperate, but no one listened. Elizabeth clutched her pearls, shaking her head, muttering prayers that couldn't save her daughter now. Johanna tried to run damage control. She approached Blake, voice trembling but soft. "You know me, please, you know me." Her hand reached for him, but he stepped back. Just one step, but it might as well have been a mile. The whole room saw it. The first public fracture. I'd seen this before, not in families, but in empires. The moment the illusion shatters and the truth doesn't just emerge, it floods. Blake turned to me, his face caught somewhere between rage and heartbreak. "You knew," he whispered. His voice cracked like old parchment. "I listened," I said quietly. "That's all I ever had to do." He looked back at Johanna, eyes hollow now. "Who are you?" he asked. She didn't answer. Security stepped forward, at the museum's request, to escort the family out. But Johanna didn't move. She turned to me instead, fury simmering under her perfect facade. "You think you've won," she spat. "You've destroyed your own son's life." I smiled, not in triumph, but in truth. "No," I said. "I saved it." As they were let out into the cold, I heard the click of camera shutters. Her mask was gone now, her beauty cracking under fluorescent light. And yet, even then, a part of me felt nothing. No joy, no relief. Just a quiet ache. Because revenge, when done right, isn't satisfying, it's sobering. But that night wasn't the end. Not even close. The real consequences hadn't arrived yet. They always come later, right after the silence. The news spread faster than I expected. By morning, every local outlet in Seattle had run the story. Engagement expose at museum gala, German family implicated in marriage fraud scheme. Photos of Johanna, pale and stunned, under museum lights. A still frame of me at the podium, hand raised mid-sentence. Someone online called it the Christmas confession. Blake didn't come home that night. I didn't blame him. The truth is heavy, and when it drops, it doesn't just crush the liar, it hits everyone standing too close. I spent the night in my study, fire burning low, a glass of scotch sweating on the desk. Rachel's photograph watched from the mantel. By morning, the phone started ringing. Reporters, colleagues, a few old friends asking if it was true. I gave them the same answer every time. Truth doesn't need permission to exist. Around noon, Blake walked in. He looked older, like the boy I raised had burned away overnight. He didn't yell, didn't cry, just sat across from me and stared at the floor. "I loved her," he said, "and she was never real." I poured him coffee and said nothing. There's no comfort for that kind of wound. You just sit with it until it stops bleeding. Then, after long silence, he asked, "When did you know?" "The night she called me an old fool," I said, in a language she thought I didn't understand. He nodded slowly, eyes glistening, and whispered, "You waited for me to see it myself." I had to. I told him, "You can't rescue a man from a lie he still believes in." He didn't answer, just looked out the window at the snow melting on the street, and said, "She'll pay for this, right?" I met his eyes. "She already is," I said, "but the real payment hasn't started yet." Because somewhere out there, Johanna still thought this was about humiliation. She didn't understand. I wasn't done digging. A week passed. The snow began to thaw, leaving muddy streaks along the curb like the city was wiping its eyes clean. But the story didn't fade. Reporters kept calling. Podcasts wanted interviews, and social media had already turned Johanna into a meme. The Christmas con. I didn't ask for any of it. I just wanted silence. Truth has a way of echoing long after you speak it. Then came the email from Ian. Short, precise. They're being investigated in Germany. Immigration and financial crimes. You did more than humiliate them, Kev. You buried them. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt hollow. I'd unearthed their lies, sure. But in the process, I dug up something darker, the quiet, unrelenting loneliness that comes after revenge. Blake spent his days working, nights drinking. He'd come home late, tired and brittle. One night, I found him sitting in the driveway, staring at nothing. "I can't believe I didn't see it," he muttered. "I thought she loved me." "She loved what you give her," I said softly. "That's not the same thing." He nodded, but his eyes stayed fixed on the dark. "You think people ever change, Dad?" I thought about Rachel, about honesty, loyalty, the way her laughter used to fill this house. "No," I said finally, "but they reveal themselves. That's something." Later that night, I received one more message. An unknown number. Just a single line. "You think you've won. Old man, watch what happens next." No name, no number traceable. But I didn't need one. I knew that tone. Johanna wasn't done. And for the first time since that Christmas dinner, I felt something I hadn't in years, anticipation. Because if she wanted a second round, she was about to learn something I'd spent a lifetime mastering. History doesn't repeat itself. It retaliates. The text didn't scare me. It intrigued me. Threats are just confessions wrapped in bravado. Proof that someone's losing control. Still, I wasn't naive. People like Johanna don't vanish quietly. They reappear when the world stops watching. And with all the attention she'd drawn, she was desperate. Desperate people are dangerous. 2 nights later, I caught movement on the porch camera, 2:17 a.m. A car idling across the street. Headlights off. Too long to be lost. Too quiet to be innocent. I stepped to the window. The house dark except for the ember glow of the fireplace. The car pulled away after a minute. Nothing dramatic. Just a message. "I can still reach you." I told Blake the next morning. He shrugged it off, said maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe he was right. But paranoia is just pattern recognition. That's been proven right too many times. That afternoon, I called Ian. "She's making contact." I told him. He sighed. "Kev, it's over. Let the authorities handle it." "Yeah," I said. "That's what we said in Cairo before the smugglers came back for the relics." Silence. Then, "All right, I'll dig again. But be careful." I spent the next few days tightening the walls. Cameras. Locks. A few quiet favors from friends and security. I wasn't scared. I was preparing. Every ruin I'd ever excavated taught me the same truth. When you uncover what's buried, something always stirs. 3 nights later, I found an envelope under my door. No stamp, no address. Inside was a photo of me at the museum, taken during the reveal, and a note. "You unearthed my past. Let's see what's hiding in yours." I read it twice, then laughed quietly. Because if Johanna wanted to dig, she had no idea how deep I'd already buried the bodies of my mistakes. And she just started her own excavation. It's strange. After a lifetime of studying the dead, you start recognizing patterns in the living. Fear, arrogance, desperation, they all leave traces. Johanna's message wasn't just a threat. It was strategy. She was shifting the field, trying to make me defensive. But the problem with playing psychological chess against a man who spent 40 years deciphering motives from bones and ruins is simple. I know the ending before the first move. Ian called 2 days later. "You were right," he said. "The Kramers are under investigation. Fraud, fake identities, tax evasion. But someone's still wiring the money from a U.S. account." "Blake's company?" I asked. "No, yours." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. My accounts are locked." They were, until someone used your old credentials, your archived research login. Someone who knew your security questions. Rachel's maiden name. Our anniversary. The site of our first dig. All things I'd told Johanna over dinners she pretended to care about. So that was her plan. Turn the truth teller into the liar. Make me look like the fraud. Clever. Almost admirable. I didn't tell Blake. Not yet. He'd had enough damage. Instead, I spent the night at my desk, piecing the puzzle together, printouts and notes scattered like fossils. Around midnight, I found what I needed, a trace of her IP from a hotel in Portland. She wasn't gone. She was close. I stared at the map, the red pin glowing on the screen, and for the first time since Rachel died, I felt that old fire again purpose. I packed a bag, left a note for Blake, taking a few days to clear my head, but my head was never clearer. If Johanna wanted to dig into my past, I'd meet her in the excavation pit. And this time, I wasn't bringing a brush. I was bringing a shovel. Portland was gray that week, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes the whole world feel like a photograph. I checked into a small roadside motel just off I-5, the kind where nobody asks questions if you pay cash. Ian had traced Johanna's alias to a boutique hotel downtown, Anna Kramer, using a forged Austrian passport. Same smile in the photo, though. Same eyes that didn't blink long enough to mean trust. I sat in my truck across the street for hours, engine idling, watching the lobby doors through the drizzle. Then she appeared, hair tied back, designer coat, a suitcase too small for someone planning to stay long. She wasn't running. She was repositioning. She walked into a cafe nearby, and I followed. Quiet, steady, invisible. It's a skill you learn when chasing tomb raiders in Cairo markets. I sat 3 tables away, pretending to read the paper while she met a man in a navy suit. Not her father. Younger. American. Their conversation was sharp, businesslike. I caught fragments. Accounts, reputation, insurance. She was making moves, trying to reclaim her narrative. Then, by some cruel grace, she laughed. That same sound from Christmas Eve, the one that had burned into me. And that's when the calm inside me broke. I stood, walked over, and said, "Funny thing about lies, Johanna, they age faster than truth." She froze. For a split second, real fear flashed across her face. Then came the smirk. "You think you can scare me," she said softly. I leaned closer. "No," I said, "I can expose you again. This time without an audience. Just consequences." The man with her shifted uncomfortably, whispered something, and left. Johanna's eyes followed him, then snapped back to me. "You should have left it alone," she hissed. "You had your victory." I smiled. Victory's temporary. Closure's permanent. I turned and walked out, rain hitting the pavement like applause. She didn't know it yet, but that was her second public humiliation, and the most painful one was still coming. 2 days later, Portland turned into a chessboard. Every move Johanna made, I was 2 steps ahead. Not out of arrogance, but out of discipline. Archaeology teaches patience. Revenge demands it. I knew she'd try to recover whatever leverage she had left. And she did. She filed a formal complaint to University Board, claiming I'd forged research funds years ago. The irony was almost poetic. The liar accusing the truth seeker of deceit. Ian called me that morning. "She's desperate," he said. "But she's good. She's filed under her alias. It'll look legitimate until we prove otherwise." "Then we prove otherwise," I said. I spent the next 48 hours gathering everything, receipts, letters, archive field notes. I even called a few old students who'd worked with me on those digs. They didn't hesitate to back me up. One of them, now a journalist, offered to run an expose on Johanna scams, cross-referencing the German investigation. That's when the idea came to me, the final excavation. If truth was my weapon, I'd wield it where everyone could see. That night, I uploaded every document, every file Ian and I had collected, into a single drive. Then I sent the link, anonymously, to the same Seattle reporter who'd covered the museum incident. Title line, "The Kramer File, The Lies Beneath." By morning, it was everywhere. National coverage this time. Photos of Johanna with fake fiancés, money trails from European shell companies. Her attempt to frame me. Her name became synonymous with deceit. I watched it unfold from a cafe window, sipping black coffee, the newspaper headlines staring back at me like closure in print. Later that afternoon, a text came in from an unknown number. "You destroyed me." I stared at it for a long time before replying. "No, you did that yourself." I just brushed away the dust. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight lift. Not joy, not triumph, just quiet equilibrium. But deep down, I knew stories like this never end clean. There's always one more layer beneath the surface. When people fall, they make noise, headlines, gossip, whispers. But when they finally hit the bottom, that's when it gets quiet. Johanna disappeared from the news after a week. Her social media gone, her family unreachable. Even Ian said, it's like she vanished. But predators don't vanish. They hide, wait, adapt. Then came the letter. No return address, just my name, written in a sharp, elegant hand I'd recognize anywhere. Inside, a single photograph. Johanna, sitting on a bench by the Rhine, looking straight into the camera. On the back, one line in German. The past is patient. I laughed, not out of mockery, but recognition. She finally understood. That's what I've been trying to teach her all along. That truth waits, quietly, like an artifact beneath the sand. You can cover it, deny it, even rewrite it, but it always survives. That evening, I took the photo to Fireplace. Blake was there, sorting through his own paperwork. Finally rebuilding. What's that? He asked. History, I said, tossing it into the flames. The paper curled, blackened, then vanished, like a confession consumed by time. He smiled faintly for the first time in months. You really did it, huh? You stopped her. I shook my head. No, I revealed her. People stopped themselves. We sat there, just listening to the crackle of the fire. Outside, the snow had started again, gentle, quiet, endless. Before bed, I poured myself a small glass of scotch and stood at the window, watching the flakes drift past the streetlights. Rachel used to say that snow was the world's way of covering old scars. Maybe she was right. But as I turned off the lights, one thought stayed with me. Revenge isn't about balance. It's about restoration, bringing order back to chaos. And sometimes, order requires ruin first. Tomorrow, I'd finish what began that Christmas Eve. Not with anger, with peace. Morning came slow, soft light spilling to the curtains like forgiveness. I brewed my coffee, the way Rachel used to, black, strong, no sugar. The house was quiet, peaceful. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like a wound. It felt earned. Then Blake walked in, holding his phone. Dad, he said, you should see this. He turned the screen toward me. A news headline from Germany. Kramer family sentence fraud, identity theft, deportation ban. A small photo beneath it. Johanna in court, hair pulled back, eyes down, no more mask. I read every word, every charge, every consequence. When I reached the end, I exhaled long and slow, not out of joy, out of release. The story was finally complete. Blake looked at me, hesitant. Do you feel better? I smiled faintly. Better? No, but lighter, maybe. I set the phone down and glanced toward the mantel, where Rachel's picture stood, her smile frozen in a time before all of this. Truth has a way of cleaning things, I said. Sometimes it takes a storm to wash the dirt away. Outside, the last of the snow was melting, dripping from the eaves like the world itself was thawing. That afternoon, I drove to the museum, the place where it all came undone. The staff greeted me warmly, no judgment, just quiet respect. I walked through the exhibits, past the masks, the relics, the bones of forgotten kings. And there, in the center hall, I stopped at a glass case. Inside lay an old bronze compass, cracked, worn, but still pointing north. My gift from Rachel years ago. I whispered to it, found the truth, love. Just took a little digging. As I walked back into the cold, I realized revenge had never really been the goal. It was excavation of lies, of grief, of everything buried too long. And for the first time in decades, I felt something simple, rare, and utterly human. Peace. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the right.